Let me just read you one line out of here, 2 lines.
Okay.
Hill said, the missing link in all systems of education known to civilization today may be found in the failure of educational institutions to teach students how to organize and use knowledge after they acquire it. He went on to say that we should understand the real meaning of the word educated. Now, he said the word education comes from the word educo. And he says it's derived from the Latin word educo, meaning to induce, to draw out, or to develop from within. An educated person is not necessarily one who has an abundance of general or specialized knowledge. An educated person is one who has so developed the faculties of their mind that they may acquire anything they want or its equivalent without violating the rights of others. An educated person is the one that knows how to go and get what they want out of life without being selfish.
That's Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a story about my 2 fathers. My poor dad was a school teacher, very smart man. And my rich dad never went to school. And so the information, so starting at the age of 9, growing up in Hawaii, the information was different. The advice was different. So I think most of your viewers out there sitting inside their head are the words from their mother and father. Go to school, get a job, pay taxes, save money, buy a house because it's an asset, get out of debt, and invest in the stock market. That creates poor people. It's a hypnosis train going through your brain. Go to school, and they say, but I learned nothing about money. Get a job, you become an employee. If you're an employee, you work for money. I pay taxes. Then they tell you to save money. Why would you save money when the government's printing money? You know, and get out of debt. Well, debt is money. I use debt to get rich. Most people use debt to get poor and invest in the stock market. I don't invest in the stock market. So when you wonder why so many people struggle financially, is they haven't challenged the hypnosis, the words. Go to school, get a job, work hard, save money, pay taxes. Until you question those hypnotic trances, you don't change.
In fact, I think a lot of things people learn, probably there's no point in learning them, because they never use them in the future. Because a lot of kids just in school kind of puzzled as to why they're there.
Well, oftentimes business education today, and I see it all the time, kids come out of college, the best colleges, Wharton and Harvard and Stanford and some of the great business schools, and they'll come out and they won't have practical experience. There's too many case studies that aren't practical.
The people who are doing the work that we care about are figuring out what to do next, not following the person who told them what to do next. And the problem with most colleges is they are high school, but with more binge drinking.
The A students work for the B students. The C students run the businesses, and the D students dedicate the buildings.
You know, we ask kids that are 16 to 18 years old to make $100,000 debt decisions when they go off to university. And they're not prepared for that. They don't know what they're getting themselves into. They just assume, okay, I'm going to pay 4 years of education at $25,000 a pop, and when I come out the other side, somehow I'll be able to pay it back.
Right.
That's not how life works anymore.
I mean, it's actually kind of funny, you know, if you think of like what is education, like you're basically downloading data and algorithms into your brain. And it's actually amazingly bad in conventional education, because like it shouldn't be like this huge chore. You know, someone's standing up there kind of lecturing at people, and they've done the same lecture 20 years in a row, and they're not very excited about it.
I hated school. I really hated school. I hated school, generally, right? Because it was this instruction following thing. Now, I bet you it's probably also because I wasn't good at it. I mean, I suspect I wasn't good at it. And some people, like I've got a great conceptual memory and a terrible rote memory. So if I have a story, I could tell you year by year kind of what happened within a story, within a context. But if I was to go into, you know, like a memory-based learning, it's terrible. I have a terrible rote memory. My situation was, I did terribly in high school. I hated high school. I just wouldn't study. I would remember that you know, my mother would send me to my room and say, you have to study. And I wouldn't study. I would refuse. I'd do anything. I would be alone in the room. I'd find something to think about or do.
You got it.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I teach middle school.
Yep.
I have an app to text my students and their parents.
I'm sorry, keep going.
6th grade. But do you see any trends for me to use with my students to connect with parents? Anything like that?
Yes, here's the biggest trend I see. That the way we educate our children right now is so broken, it makes me actually want to slip off of this. And I believe that most teachers that I know that are paying attention do. Because actually, here's the problem. We are teaching our children to memorize shit and then regurgitate it in a world where everything who's the 9th president in the United States history? This old fucker. There it is. Like, it is ludicrous what we're doing right now. We need to completely reverse it, which is they can memorize this shit at home. Or don't memorize it at all because it's never been less valuable to be information smart than it is now because anything you want to know is right here. I don't care if you know something. I can tell you the same thing in 4 minutes, 4 seconds, 8 seconds. It's right here. So, right, like, it's really broken. It's not the reality of the world we live in. Like, there's a lot of things to do, but the truth is, what I would implore, and what I implore my sister who's a teacher to do, and some of my other friends, my most practical advice to a 6th grade teacher is to try to build the self-esteem of the students in your class. That is the thing I spend my entire life thinking about, which is the only tool against all the pressures that our kids face is self-esteem. That is the weapon. And so I only had one teacher ever that I saw, now rewinding my brain and realizing what she was doing, that went person by person in her class and accelerated and celebrated their unique individual strengths, whether it was sports, school, personality, humor, kindness, prettiness, whatever it was. She built self-esteem, and that's why I remember her.
All right, I have 2 older brothers. One was in high school in the early 1970s, and this was a time when a high school GED got you a job, all right, and a college degree was exemplary. My other brother, Pat, was in high school in the early 80s, and by this time, the GED wasn't enough to guarantee employment. You needed a college degree, and if you got one, you had a pretty good chance of getting the kind of job that you wanted after you graduated. Now me, I graduated high school in 1988, got my college degree in 1993, and that college degree in 93 did not mean as much. It was not a ticket, it was not a voucher, it was not a free pass go to anything. So I asked the question, what does your college degree mean?
I talk a lot about what's wrong with the education system. And one of the things that I think is wrong with the education system, I'm interested in cryptocurrencies, but also the blockchain, which is really a tool to decentralize things. And Joel Salatin, my first mentor, said, we have the same education system. If you got in a time machine, went back to pre-Germany, Otto von Bismarck, late 1800s, they were teaching a system that created robots and created soldiers, and that's what they wanted, people who obeyed. Everything else has gotten better. You don't travel by steam engine anymore. You don't put leeches on your body if you're sick. We have penicillin, but we haven't, if you go in the classroom, it basically hasn't changed. And part of the problem, Joel Salatin told me, is a few bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. decide what you need to learn. Well, do we need to only learn what the hypotenuse of a triangle is in the year 2018? What about learning how to use Excel?
Yeah,
learning how to buy a house.
So I think that the biggest thing that's wrong with education, I agree, is a certain level of centralized control. There's no reason why education has to be done the way that it's done. I mean, everything is so decentralized now. We should be able to personalize educational programs to nearly every kid. Now, you don't necessarily have to do it when the kid's 5. But by the time the kid's 11 or 12 years old, the idea that everybody has to be learning exactly the same thing is really stupid. And then the idea that everybody has to go to college, regardless of what your major is also incredibly stupid, right? Like, my wife had to go to college because she's a doctor, so she was actually studying actual things in college.
Right.
I had a poli-sci major at UCLA. You're telling me I couldn't have gone straight to Harvard Law School and studied law? Like I needed those 4 years of learning nonsense in poli-sci and just going into debt in order to do that. Like that I think that law school should be skipped and you should go straight to an apprenticeship. I think that actually is the way people used to get jobs. No one is qualified coming out of college for anything, right? I mean,
I agree with that.
You're pretty much useless coming out of college.
Yes. So far, I have all the people I've hired in over 10 decade plus. Never hired someone competent on day one.
Exactly.
Ever.
Exactly.
And I wasn't competent on day one. I just read an interesting piece of research. It says, you know, one of the problems in schools is you're primarily being taught by what they call the tutorial method, like somebody preaching at you. The way we do it, fascinatingly enough, is only 15% of people learn the way that all school classrooms are set up right now. So we're basically doing something that we know fails for 85% of people.
Look at how the educational system was structured. It was structured to make workers for factories. It was structured to make workers for particular businesses. And that's not what we're into anymore. I mean, since I graduated from law school, 2018, I've been in 6, 7 different jobs, right? The days when you were at one job forever are just gone.
Yeah.
Like my grandparents working at a place for 50 years. First of all, the company that you're at can be around for 50 years in all likelihood. Right? The turnover on the Fortune 500 is incredibly high. I mean, you're great about this, but I mean, learning is a lifelong process, and if you're not deepening that, then you become useless in the marketplace pretty quickly.